empowering the blind to be excellent, do more, and live with greater success. This show is for you and about you. Welcome to the Delivering Access Podcast. All right, well, Delivering Access Land, we definitely have a great individual that's going to be interviewed today. I want to introduce to you all Sina Bahram. Sina, are you prepared to empower?
Absolutely.
Great, man. So we want to dive right into everything Sina. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and the tools that you used along the way and your blindness.
Sure. So my parents were born in Iran, and they grew up there, and my brother and sister were born there as well. And so then there was political upheaval and such. Some of your listeners might remember their history, and so they decided that, man, maybe revolution isn't a great place to hang around. So we should get out of here. So they did. The quickest path to the United States. My dad had some experience with the States. He had gone to college here. His dad had come over here for various trips. So he obviously knew what opportunity was over here. And the quickest path to do that was through Turkey. So they went to Turkey, and actually the story is sort of that my dad said, well, we're taking a 2-week vacation to Turkey. Now, my mom probably knew, but we're taking a 2-week vacation to Turkey, and they landed in Turkey, and then he was like, by the way, I kind of forgot to mention we're not going back. And so that's it. Welcome to fleeing a country, right? And so I was born in Turkey on the way over to the United States. So we spent a little time in Ankara and Istanbul and Izmir, and but I grew up in the States, so I speak Farsi and such, but I grew up in the States, and I grew up in South Carolina and then North Carolina. Now, as I was a baby, they started noticing some vision problems, things like that. I'm one of those interesting cases where they don't really know. I've been to Johns Hopkins and, you name all the world's famous doctors, but they don't really actually know. Some of it's a retinal detachment in the right eye, and I have a little bit of vision in my left. So I have a little bit of sight, but I read Braille, I use a screen reader, I walk with a cane, that sort of thing. And so as I was growing up, I had a little bit more vision than I do now. And what that allowed me to do is lean in real close to a computer. And this is back in the DOS days, okay? So, you're talking about characters on a screen and stuff, right?
Right.
And my brother and sister are both older than me, and my brother about 11 or so years older than me. So he'd be working on the computer, on the family computer, right? And obviously, big brother, right? You want to see what he's up to, right? So I would gravitate towards that, and I would sit off to his left, chin in hand, right? Just off to the corner of the screen, just watching whatever he did, right?
Right.
And
the women
just looking at the screen, exactly, right? This is before we even had the web, man. This is back in the day. Oh. And it was interesting because he let me do that, right? It wasn't whatever. It just okay, that's cool. You can hang out. And so I started picking up those things. Started going into DOS. I would type in mode 40, which was a thing to make it 40 lines per screen instead of 80 lines per screen. So what that did is made the characters twice as big, right? Okay. And it was DOS, so it was white characters on a black background. That was also good because it was really high contrast, right? So those two things allowed me to leave a lot of nose prints on the screen and use a computer. I gravitated towards it. I loved it. And mainly at that time, I think, because, hey, it's what Bobby did. It's what my older brother did. But later on, because I've discovered how much potential it has. So I kept doing that. I used some enlargement software. Everybody kind of goes through this phase if you're low vision where you're like, oh, I can see. And so, you have that thing going on. And so, and I didn't actually start using screen readers until much later. I had some Braille note takers and stuff like that in school. This is middle school and high school, but I actually didn't really fully start using screen readers until middle school and high school. Not really in elementary and stuff like that. That was still just kind of DOS and programs like Homepage Reader from IBM. This is old stuff now, but it's amazing because it's how I learned how to use technology. And so I use those tools, and I really started falling in love with what I could do, and more importantly, you know, the fact that there wasn't really anything I couldn't do if I came up with ways of getting around any obstacles there was on the computer. So, like, if if you have some obstacles in real life, sometimes it's there's ways around it, but it's a lot harder. But in a computer, it's digital, and if you come up with some solutions, you come up with some workarounds. Mm-hmm. Then the world is yours, and so that was just that really spoke to me even as a kid, and so I lost a little bit of vision when I was in second grade or so. I was practicing serving against the backboard, with a tennis ball, right? And I missed, but my face didn't, and so that was a thing, and so that's where I am now. Kind of a little bit of light perception, some shapes and colors and stuff in my left eye, but otherwise none. And so started getting into computers, was a really big science fan, read so many books on tape. I mean, you couldn't, I exhausted the library. The Library of Congress has no Star Trek book that I haven't read, as a kid. Right. And, but the classics and everything as well. And everything had tech in it those days. I mean, it was exploding. This was the 90s. And so, the beeps on, I don't know if you ever used audiobooks on tape, but when you would put it in fast forward, remember the beeps where it would tell you the page numbers? Yep, beep, beep. And then for like chapters, it had the longer beep. And I always wondered, well, how did they do that? I was a little kid. I didn't know. Right. So, and if you listen to the regular book, you'll hear a lower frequency tone at the bottom, right? And when you run that in fast forward, it turns into a beep. I just thought that was so cool, right? And it's just tech was all around. So I fell in love with it. And so, fast forward a little bit and go into high school and really fall in love with computers, start making web pages and, learning C++, which is a programming language, all these different things, basically figuring out that you can make the computer do whatever you want to do. Even as a kid, when I was really young, I figured out that there was all this text that came up before you would hit F5 to play a game. This was Nibbles, the snake bite, where you would go around and eat the numbers, the snake would get longer. And I figured out that if you change that, the number of retries from 3 to 999, you could live forever. You could, so that's a lot, and it's things like that where I could change some things, and then when I hit a button, magic happened, right? And so this is awesome. This is like, wow, I want to do more of this. So went into college and went into computer science, of course, and finished up my undergrad there at NC State, North Carolina State University. We moved, by the way. I grew up 10 years in South Carolina, and so I did elementary school and middle school in South Carolina, and then in high school, I moved to North Carolina. And went to NC State University for my undergrad and for my graduate career. Got a degree in computer science, and just really fell in love with it then. Started working with some companies, even as an undergrad, with startups, which is still a passion of mine. I just love small companies. You get none of the bureaucracy, none of the, it's just when everybody thinks that they're going to be out of a job in 2 weeks, you don't have time for messing around. So everybody's concentrated on the problem. And I love that. It's really stressful. It's really fast paced. You got to like that sort of thing. This is like volunteering to work in an ER or as an air traffic controller. But if you like that sort of thing, it's awesome. Man. The people you meet and the problems you try to solve, they're amazing. Go ahead.
That actually resonates with me. Being a startup and having this big audacious goal and just wanting to employ the blind. So I definitely know what you mean as far as a startup mentality. But you said you're gonna fast forward. I want to rewind just briefly and talk about the Mode 40. I think AI Squared owes you a bit of royalty for coming up with the first ever, in literal sense, Zoom text. So,
yeah, indeed.
That's amazing. So we're going to dive more into your story. It's definitely interesting and very empowering. But before we do, and this show is about you, it's for you to, get your word out there to the listeners. But talk to us about your passion and desires for the blind in the future.
Well, I think that it relates. I'd like to think that I'm I'm kind of living what I preach. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I think it relates. So when I was in college, I quickly discovered that, and something kind of I knew going in, which was, look, STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. So
Right.
STEM topics. This is a really clear path to success. It's not the only one. Okay, there's blind doctors, there's blind lawyers, there's you name it. But for me and for several other folks that I know, this was a really clear path to success. And the reason was that it goes back to those things we were talking about before. Behind a keyboard, you can do anything, right?
Yep.
And so, where was I? I was at the White House, actually. I was talking about, we were talking about different, I was saying something like, I can do all these, programming languages and, 10 or 15 different programming languages, and that's all great, and computer vision algorithms and AI and, all this advanced stuff. Mm-hmm. But what's hard sometimes? Knowing where to throw away your coffee cup, right? Like where the trash can is, in a physical space, right? And it's like, it's very interesting that you can do all these complicated things behind a keyboard, but there's some physical world challenges just because you lack a sensory, you lack a vision. So for me, my passion would be to really encourage, especially younger, blind young adults and kids, to really get into tech. It's obviously changing the world. I mean, how many people clued into this, the new iPhone announcement, and everything like that. And it's got several neat things about it. One of them is that technology doesn't only help you in the virtual world. That's a common thing. We use screen readers, we use braille displays, we use all those things that help us in the computer world. So we use computers to help us use computers, right? But it can also help you in the real world, right? So this is the idea that, there's devices, GPS comes to mind immediately, but there's other things like wearing a pair of glasses over your face and having that read out to you an environment or tell you about what's around you, where now you can start using technology and start developing your own technology, all right? These are things you can hack on yourself. You don't have to wait for some assistive technology company to come up with an idea and then go, pay them $5,000 a device to go do this. This is stuff that you can code in your basement. All right. And that, to me, that's awesome. I mean, you want to talk about empowering. If you can go spend $10, $20, $30, $40 on some hardware, and you can go learn by just Googling and reading some free online books and watching YouTube videos on how to program something and then put together and change hardware that would allow you to make up for a disability or a functional limitation, that I don't have a better definition. Wow. That's awesome to me. Okay, that's just awesome to me. And I've seen this in action. A buddy of mine, Komraj Sharma, he's this guy in Nepal. Now they only got democracy like 5 years ago or something, right? I mean, there were dudes with guns on the streets and everything, right? And it's this blind dude in Nepal. And he's like, I'm going to start a school for the blind. I'm like, that is awesome, man. Like, how can I? So we helped him out a little bit. He connected him with some folks at the Free Software Foundation. And, I'm on his board actually for this school in Nepal, and it's a school for the blind. And technology is what allowed him to do that. He's running open source screen readers and software, and got some donations of some hardware. And he's teaching these folks in Nepal who just had absolutely, nothing. We're talking nothing. And now able to start getting jobs and getting employed because they're able to use tech, something they didn't even dream about a couple of years ago, right? Right. So to me, technology all the way. I mean, I'm shamelessly enthusiastic an enthusiast about that.
And I am definitely with you with opening up my firm. I wanted it to be virtual. I wanted us to be able to work from anywhere, whether it was Wi-Fi connection on the beach in Panama City, Florida, or in our home in the living room watching, television. Mm-hmm. I wanted it to be virtual. I wanted it to be accessible. I wanted blind people to be at the helm running things. And we've definitely created an archetype to make that happen. And I want to say it here live. I want to work with you because my ultimate goal, my biggest dream for the blind that resonates with me so much is to be able to open a virtual call center. And so many people say the technology is the barrier, and I truly believe that it is not the barrier. I think at this point it's the mentality. What do you think?
I agree. I agree. I agree halfway. I think the tech is not the barrier. I fully agree with you on that. I'll go one step further. Call centers are virtual these days. Okay. They just sometimes happen to be housed in physical locations. But if you actually look at the back end, as far as the computer is concerned, there's no difference from the person in India, the person in somewhere in South Carolina, and the other person in Canada when it switches over, right, from 8 to 5 p.m. to 6 to 1 a.m.
Yeah.
So they're already virtual in that sense. I would say that there's some business things that you always obviously have to figure out, and then, like you said, there is a mentality problem. The interesting thing is that call centers are heavily audio centric, right? I mean, blind people live in audio. It's not necessarily because of blind superpowers trademark. It's just that whatever daredevil might lead you to believe. But no, it's just that you pay a lot more attention to what you're listening to, right? Because you have to. And so something like a call center, for example, is a neat opportunity because it gets people to live in that space, get exposed to technology, do something that can be made quite accessible. And also by doing it, I think it would serve as an example of a successful, venture, basically saying, well, we wanted to do this thing. We are able to employ this handful of blind people. We're able to deliver a service that other corporations and businesses are willing to pay for. So I think there's a lot of potentials for wins there. Mm-hmm. If you can craft it correctly, then that's got some potential.
So work with me. Let's think about that and do some mastermind brainstorming. And let me throw one more thing out there to you and just see where you hit this. I was talking to my father one day, and he said, a call center is great, but what if blind individuals were 911 operators? Because you guys do have a keen sense of hearing. You're in tune to hearing. You could hear the stress level, or you could, be able to detect or discern, different nuances in a 911 call that may or may not be picked up even with a trained professional. What do you think about that? Do you think that's somewhat true, partly true, all the way true? What do you think?
I think it's partly true depending on the user, because I mean you got to give giving credit where credit is due. These guys are trained well, and now sometimes we have some, infrastructure problems in this country, and should we even fund 911? Apparently is an actual thing. That just blows my mind. But there's all sorts of there's those kinds of issues. But putting those aside, I think some of these guys are they have some of the hardest jobs in the world, and they're pretty well trained to what they do. I think that what would come naturally to, let's say, someone who's blind is they might be able to pick up on some of the audio cues because they naturally have to do that in conversation. They naturally have to do that, or innately have to do that in other situations where that's their window into the world, right? So that part's easy. But then you have to remember, well, they still have to get trained on all the systems, and you want to make sure that in this situation, so I'm the first person to say, a blind person can do anything, but I also want to make sure that they absolutely can do anything so that their functional limitation is not the reason for somebody in an emergency not being able to get the help they need. You know what I mean? So like, for example, if there's a visual map on the screen and we don't have an accessible version of that, then that's not good. It's not good for them, first of all, because they're responsible, but also it's not good for the person, calling in. But again, I don't view that as a unachievable challenge. Personally, the technologist in me just views that as fun. I'd love to, make that work. We're actually working on some technologies sort of in my research to do some of those things, but it's a neat challenge.
Okay. Well, cool. We'll discuss that. So, of the innovations and technologies that's out there now, what's exciting you the most?
I really like the this breaking down of barriers between what is tech and what isn't. So, back in the day, I was telling you about sitting beside my brother in front of the family computer. Like, I don't even, is that still a thing? I mean, I guess that maybe is still a thing, sort of like the family computer, but it's you have a computer in your pocket. It's called your phone, right? You have 5 to 50 computers in your car and in your, in your house and in your toaster oven. So it's just one of those things where tech is everywhere, right? And this is really great. I love this. It's this idea of kind of ubiquity everywhere. But the corollary to that is, Well, we have a lot of opportunities there, and then we have a lot of potential for them to be not accessible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every time your cable company rolls out a new fancy DVR system to let you browse through your 750,000 new channels of whatever, right? And it's an on-screen menu that doesn't read to you, then that's not so great. So yay, tech is everywhere, but I can't use it because I'm blind.
Right.
And so what I also like is that sometimes those sort of closed-in solutions, they're starting not to matter anymore because folks are offering online services. Folks are offering apps which can then be made accessible to interface with those things. It's no longer to use one service, you have to use it in one way. We have multiple ways of using things. And that aspect, that sounds subtle, that sounds kind of esoteric, but it's actually really important, because what it means is that somebody can come along and the developer or the designers of a particular service, they might not have thought of that ahead of time, even if they tried, even if they did a good job with universal design and user-centric design at the beginning, they might not have imagined a particular use case. But because they designed their things extensively, because they designed their things as a service that other clients can use, then that person can come along and say, well, I can't use my arms at all, but I have this stick that I blow into, and it moves my cursor across the screen, right? And that's a real thing. And then they'll say, well, okay, no problem. We have an API for this. We can remap it to that. And so that to me has so much potential. It's some of the stuff that I work with some of my clients, in the museum world. It's really neat to see that if you design things extensively and sort of in a general way, it's okay. You can have those use cases come along in the future. And yeah, maybe there's a little bit of work, but not anywhere near as much of the hopeless situation as it was even 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So do you think we can have a sexy device with accessibility, kind of like an iPhone or an iPad, and it be universally designed for most in a device?
I think that it's when you say in a device, I mean, for example, the iPhone/iPad kind of tries to do that anyway, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's got some things for vision impaired. I use an iPhone, for example, on a daily basis. It's got some TTY support. It's for hearing. It's got some mobility things put in. It's got Braille. It's got autistic for autistic kids to let them and actually anybody with that sort of like intellectual disability, where you've got different parts of the screen you can and can't access. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's all these different ATs in there. Now, I'm hardly the first one to say this. The iPhone's not perfect, and it's definitely a walled garden like every other mobile platform. But when you say everything in one device, I would come back with, well, it depends on what the goal is, right? Is your goal a communications device? Is your goal a thing to consume media? Is it to tell you where to go, to eat food? I mean, what it really depends on what the goal is. My preference would be that as long as you make the hardware mostly accessible, then let's work at the software layer, because what's the old adage? Hardware eventually breaks and software eventually works. So that's sort of
right.
That's sort of the approach I take to things.
So yeah, and I can definitely understand that, and I just wanted to see where you would go with that. I just purchased a washer and dryer set, and they're beautiful. They actually have buttons. The only one set in the whole store.
It's amazing you found one with buttons.
Right, and it's the new age thing. There's these buttons, so it has this crappy music. It's like. Mm-hmm. It's done, and I'm like, well, instead of playing me the crappy music, why don't let the menus talk to me?
Right.
Clearly you could put audio in there if
right.
So that's my thing. So just creating the same device. Use Linux, use whatever, and just add in the audio voice. It helps everyone.
It does. I mean, it not only helps. I mean, so let's put. You and I are very familiar with the challenges blind people face, but let's put that aside. Blind people, you see one on the street or whatnot, it's not always in your perception. We're working on that and all, but let's put that aside. But everybody gets old, okay? Everybody gets old. And unless if you die too early, and then you don't have this problem. So, either way, it's a win-win from this perspective.
Right.
So now you're getting old. Things are harder to actuate. Things are touch screens are. If you've ever taken an 8-year-old and given them an iPhone, and taken an 80-year-old and given them an iPhone, chances are that the 80-year-old took to it a lot faster than the 80-year-old. And that has nothing to do with ability or intelligence or anything like that. It's just what you're used to, what you're exposed to, how quick it is to learn new things, all of those sorts of things. And so when you say it'll help everybody, you're absolutely right. That speech would help the elderly woman who can't see as well as she used to, or thought she hit one button. Maybe she thought she hit cold, and really she hit warm, and she doesn't want to ruin that silk blouse, right? Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, that's actually a really important thing. It's not just a convenience, but it actually has real world effects, right? And I totally agree with you from a universal design point of view. I would go further to say that there's a couple of ways of doing that. On the technical end, you could start encouraging folks to do these DIY, these do-it-yourself projects where you start hack your washing machine, hack your dryer, right? Get a Raspberry Pi and see if you can figure out the interface, and get a buddy who can solder, and go to town. Not everybody can do that, mind you, but people who can. The good news is that it's a very open source mentality, and so instead of saying we just came up with a $20,000 dryer that talks and that's the only difference, it's really a dryer from 1993. Instead it's I did this thing, and here's a video and a web page about it. Here's a PayPal link or something if you want to throw me some money, buy me a beer, that kind of thing, right? But then somebody else can take this code, and somebody else can, you want Braille? Well, all right, here's the library. Why don't you add on Braille? So I love that mentality, that aspect of, hack the devices around you. And by the way, speaking of that, and I've used that term a lot, hack the devices around you and things like that. And, given all the media concentration on hacking these days, hacking doesn't mean, what is the Princess Bride? I don't think it means what you think that means. Right. So, hacking just means to program something, make it do something in ways that it originally wasn't designed to do. It doesn't mean, hacking into a website, that sort of thing. It just means, programming on something and changing it and making it do stuff that it wasn't originally designed for. And that's, that's an amazing learning experience, A, and it's got some amazing potential to change the real world for the better, B.
Well, I'm going to give you 2 A's and B's. One, I'm going to hack my fiance and make her do things that she wasn't originally programmed to do. And B, you just voided my warranty on my brand new washer and dryer, because that makes total sense. Hey, I can find someone with the expertise to come in and actually put voice on my washer and dryer, because it's just a screen. Yep. It's going to be one word, and it's going to say cold, warm, hot. What's so hard about that? Yeah.
There's all sorts of different ways. There's a computer inside, and it's not going to be, it might not be easy. Maybe they've done something really crazy in the back end, but it's things like that where even the act of trying that project is the way to do it. And by the way, speaking of your fiance, I shouldn't tell you this, but there's something called neuro-linguistic programming. And so you should look into that. I'm not a huge believer myself because I haven't really seen the data to see if it works, but certain people are major fans of NLP. So it's a way of giving sub-hypnotic suggestions through natural.
Hey, my man, anything that works. So, man, you spoke a little bit about the data just now and in the past, and you do a lot with data, a lot with research, a lot with businesses. So I'm going to ask you a question, and take that question and tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, and how that's helping to invoke change in the blindness community for the future.
So I'm doing a few things. I wear a couple of hats these days. And one of the hats that I wear is I'm finishing up a PhD in computer science. So I'm finishing up my doctorate at NC State. And it's in a field called human-computer interaction. And so, I tell people it's our jobs to try to make computers suck less, the interfaces to them. And it's an interesting, it's a really interesting approach, I think, just because I got to use my own stuff, my own code, my own project to get access to something that I previously didn't have access to. So I got really tired. I had this Android tablet in the lab, right? And I got really tired of hearing blank or whatever, or graphic, every time I loaded up Google Maps, right? I was like, this is stupid. This needs to change. How hard can this be? It's one of those, well, why don't you put your code where your mouth is, right? So I said, all right, why don't we? And so I took an approach where we can gloss over some of the technical details, but basically, we project the location of your finger onto the earth. and then reverse geolocate that, right? Just like a GPS device does. So what that means is anywhere you touch the screen, it figures out where you're touching, and then it can read it to you. Now, that's great. That just, I had that working in about a day or so, and I loaded that up, and I was like, oh, look, California, look, Oregon, look, a bunch of water. There's a lot of water around, 70% of the earth,
right.
So water. And, but, that's great, but it wasn't all that useful, right? Like, I mean, it let me feel around, but it was talking all over the place. Every time I changed a pixel, with my finger, it would talk. So then I came up with, well, all right, why don't we let the user be in control? And that's a big thing with me. I appreciate well-designed systems, but I also appreciate the fact that you're never going to target or successfully reach all of your users. So give them a little bit of control, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And so not only is it okay, but it's something that you should strive to do. Right. So what my system does, it's called Takisi, touch it, key it, speak it. And it refers to the fact that you can touch it, you can use a keyboard with it, and you can also talk to it, and it talks to you, etc. And it lets you have this multi-modal, this multiple approach way of exploring graphical information. Right now we're concentrating on maps. Mm-hmm. And so you can change the resolution of the screen, right? Because if you can see and you're using a touch screen, then what you see is what you can touch, right? Mm-hmm. You see a button, you can go touch it. Well, it turns out if you're blind, what you see doesn't matter because you can't see anything. Right. But it turns out what you can touch, that matters a lot more. What you can touch is what you can touch. That might sound kind of vacuously true, like, yeah, duh, tell me something I didn't know. But no, it means that, well, why don't we let you change what you can touch at any given time, right? So it's this idea of, why don't we, you want to touch 50 things at a time on a screen? All right, well, let's make that happen. You want to dial that down back to 20 because it got a little complicated, or you wanted to try to follow a bigger country in Europe? All right, let's dial it down. Let's make that happen. And so what this allows you to do is take graphical information and sort of put this invisible grid in front of it, if you will. Mm-hmm. And it lets the user control the dimensions of that invisible grid, okay? And so then as you're moving your finger across the screen, this is all done in software, mind you. It's no special hardware, no special tablet, nothing like that.
Okay.
And you can run your finger across, and the computer can read to you what is under your finger based on the different resolutions that you've picked. You can zoom in and out, of course, and there's several other fancy things that you can do. Like you can ask it, what's around me, or what's around here, and touch the screen, right? And so then what that allows you to do is have this almost A, conversational, but B, interactive approach to exploring graphical information, right? And so we're good on that with regular interfaces. We can, if you're blind, you can use an iPhone. You can swipe around all over. You can double tap on icons. That works. Why don't we do that for graphics? Why don't we do that for something graphical like a map or a bar chart or a flow chart? Election year was just, it seems like it's been a while actually, but 2011, 2012, there was huge, everywhere you would look, there was data on the screen on CNN and MSNBC and Fox and anything, all just a bunch of data everywhere. Pie chart this and bar graph that, right? There's no reason why those shouldn't be accessible. They're very standard ways of expressing data, right? A computer can realize what they are through a couple of tricks like computer vision and things like that. And then you can touch it and have that read out to you. And so part of what I like to concentrate on in my research as I'm finishing up is exploring some of the reasons for, okay, we've got the system, it works, quote unquote. Why does it work the way it does, right? That's the research part. That's the question you have to ask is, okay, let's compare it against other approaches. Why does it work the way it is? So I'm in the process of running some experiments on that and, writing that up and hopefully getting done with this PhD. I'm ready to get out.
Okay.
So that's the research side. Well, it turns out that this has some, real world applications. I obviously it helps me explore a map and do all those kinds of things. But the Museum of Science in Boston, for example, is one of my clients where they've got these wind generators, these wind turbines on the roof, right? And one of their exhibits, they're trying to teach the museum visitors about different kinds of wind technology and that sort of thing. So they've got this kiosk where they've got different wind turbines, right? And they've got different manufacturers of them, different shapes and sizes. And they've got the graph, there's those graphs again, the graphs of the data from how much power they're generating based on how much wind is going on, right? 10 miles per hour wind, how much power got generated? So anybody can walk by, look at the different kinds of wind turbines and quickly get that data. Well, how do you do that? You're some blind fifth grader. You walk into the museum with your class. You're excited because you're at a science museum, and all your sighted friends can go look at this thing and they can hit buttons and they can play with the touch screen. And you're like, well, it's smooth. It's glass. So that's not cool. And my goal is to make sure, that little blind fifth grader isn't sitting there being like, okay, that's smooth. Well, she should be able to walk up to the thing, swipe around, touch it. She can use her iPhone in her pocket. Well, I don't know if you have iPhones in fifth grade, but these days you do. Right. And she should be able to go up to that thing, use it, be able to get the information, and more importantly, be able to talk to her sighted friend beside her and collaborate regardless of whatever functional limitations they have, or maybe her deaf friend, for example, right? And so that's the kind of thing where you incorporate universal design into the beginning. I've been working with them on some of the approaches to exploring graphical information, and we're actually going to be rolling this out. I mean, this is a real thing, and so somebody can walk into the museum and they can accessibly use this sort of thing, and that's sort of some other people I've been talking to are folks like the Smithsonian, just who you'd expect in the museum world. I'm trying to get more into that space to help them think about universal design and accessibility up front, but then B, really not take the easy way out, like, okay, well, here's a Braille label or here's an audio label. Let's go. I want to access that awesome multi-million-dollar 3D interface. I want to make that accessible. There's no reason that it shouldn't be accessible.
All right, so you're gonna be rich. You're gonna be snoozing with. You already been to the White House. I mean, I'm dare to ask, is the White House really, really white? But.
Yes, it is.
Honesty, I want to be your friend because I see you're going places, and you're not only going places, but you're designing what the interfaces look like when you go. So, I'm with you. It's Sina and Vishon. There you go.
Well, that's really kind. I mean, basically, my goal about this is I need to be passionate about what I do. Oh, yeah. And if you can help some people along the way, then that's awesome. If you can do things that can help a lot of people, then that's just kind of cream on top, right? Yeah. And so the idea is that there's, I think, a lot of people who could be the next whatever, whatever the cliche is, right? The next Steve Jobs, it used to be. The next Bill Gates, it used to be, whatever, right? The next Obama, right? Whatever you want. Insert famous person here. Right. And if the only thing preventing them from doing that is because they couldn't get inspired at a museum because they had a really bad experience because they couldn't see, or they couldn't use a really cool new computer because they can't move their hands really well, and everything's touch these days, but there's a solution around that. If those are the only little things, to me, that's crazy. We should fix that. We should make that not happen, right? And basically, you want to talk about empowering. The idea here is that it's not only empowering people to go do things, but to basically remove these obstacles. And what I love about technology these days is you can actually empower people to empower, which is that you can empower people to make technologies that can not only help themselves, but help other people.
Oh yeah, help enough people get what they want, and ultimately you always have what you want. It's one of the great sayings that I've always heard. And along those same lines, if you think pennies, you'll get pennies. You think dollars, you'll get dollars. So
right.
That experience is, either negative or positive, when you go, and there's no, it was all right. It was either, yeah, that was great, or, that was horrible. I didn't get anything out of it.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly. So that's excellent, man. So we're going to bring the interview to a close. Sorry to say. And what we'd like to do is you give us one parting piece of advice, tell us how we can reach you, and then we'll say goodbye.
All right. Well, as far as how to reach me, I'm pretty active on Twitter. So that's at Sina Bahram, at SinaBahram. And I have a website, sinabahram.com, SinaBahram.com. And on there's all sorts of different ways to contact me. I have a blog you can click on there, and some links to my research. And if anyone's interested in the business side of the house, any kind of consulting or things like that, love to talk to you. And the name of the company is Prime Access Consulting. And that website's really easy. It's pac.bz for biz.
All right.
And, and as far as the parting piece of advice, I'd say, it's a little cliche, but I really do believe it. And I don't do it every day, but I'd like to, which is, learn and do something new every day. And the thing that you learn and do, make sure it's out of your comfort zone, basically. And so if it's, if you're a developer and you want to learn a new programming language or something like that, that's fine. That's great. But if it's just, how to roast coffee or something, you'd be amazed at the ideas that I've come up with or that I've just thought about and that other people have told me this has happened to them too, when they've been doing something completely not related to, the problem they're trying to solve, but then they've been able to, it's cross-disciplinary, right? They take that thing, well, this swimmer was talking about this. I can use that in a server. And that sort of thing that I love that. And so I would say learn and do something new every day.
Yeah. Step out your comfort zone.
Yep.
Yeah. It'll stretch you. It's like, I was fearful of crossing the street. And one day I said, you know what? I'm going to cross the street and I'm going to come back and I'm going to cross the street again and I'm going to come back. And then next thing you know, I get people saying, why you keep crossing the street over and over again? And I'm just building that muscle because I'm going to cross more streets. So I stepped out of my comfort zone. I crossed that street. I came back. I crossed it again. And that's the same thing with anything that you want to learn, anything that you want to do, any place that you want to go. Just step out one step at a time and make it happen. So, Sina, this has been a amazing interview. And I'd like to give thanks to Aaron Linkson, our podcast producer, sound engineer, Sina Bahram, our highlighted guest for today. If you guys like what you hear, give us a 5-star rating in iTunes. And so now we'll say goodbye. Bye.
Goodbye.
In my traditional closing, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you are right. Think pennies, get pennies. Think dollars, get dollars. See you on the other side.
This has been a Yuga Music Group production. Website 81x.com/Yuga/X. The Yuga Music Group can be reached at 678-608-8969. All rights reserved.